A military watch with a cracked face and a stranger's desperate eyes would change everything Stephen Scott thought he knew about fate, loss, and the invisible threads that connect broken souls across time and distance. Stephen sat on the weathered bench outside Pioneer Courthouse Square in downtown Portland, watching the October rain create rivers between the red brick pavers. His daughter Zephyr was inside the Children's Museum with his sister, giving him 30 minutes of rare solitude to process another sleepless night filled with memories of his late wife Michelle and his brother Marcus, who never made it home from Afghanistan. The sound of someone approaching made him look up. A man in his late 20s stood nearby, thin and hollow-eyed, with the kind of careful posture that has suggested chronic pain. His blonde hair was unkempt, his jacket worn thin at the elbows. But something about his bearing suggested military training beneath the weariness. The stranger reached into his pocket and pulled out a military-issued watch. Its leather band cracked and faded. He held it towards Stephen with trembling hands. "Someone needs this more than I do," the man said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that spoke of too many losses. "I can see it in your eyes. You understand what it means to lose someone in uniform." Stephen stared at the watch, his heart stopping as he glimpsed an engraving on the back. The letters were worn but unmistakable. M. Scott, his brother's initials. His throat closed as memories crashed over him like a tide. Marcus adjusting that same watch before deploying. Marcus promising to bring it home. Marcus who never came back. "Where did you get this?" Stephen whispered, his hands shaking as he accepted the watch. The stranger, who introduced himself as Adrian Hayes, sat down heavily beside him. His story spilled out in fragments, each word carefully measured as if speaking caused physical pain. He had been a combat medic with the Army's Medical Corps, stationed in Afghanistan until an IED explosion left him with traumatic brain injury and PTSD that ended his military career. Adrian spoke of losing his entire unit except for one soldier he managed to stabilize before the medevac arrived. He had carried that watch for 2 years, unable to return it to anyone, haunted by the faces of those he couldn't save. The medical discharge brought him home to nothing. His family, strict evangelical Christians from rural Montana, had cut ties when they learned about his sexuality during his recovery. Stephen listened with growing recognition, pieces of a puzzle falling into place. He knew about the attack that took Marcus. He knew his brother had been saved initially, kept alive long enough to write a final letter home. But he had never known the name of the medic who fought to save him. As Adrian's story continued, Stephen felt the universe shifting around them. This wasn't coincidence. This was something deeper. Something that connected his family's greatest loss to the stranger's greatest regret. When Adrian finished speaking, Stephen looked down at the watch again. Marcus had worn it every day of his deployment, a gift from their father before he passed away. Seeing it again felt like holding a piece of his brother's soul. The rain began to ease as Stephen made a decision that would alter both their lives forever. He asked Adrian to come home with him, to share dinner, to continue a conversation that felt like it had been waiting years to begin. Something in Adrian's damaged eyes reminded Stephen of his own grief, but also of hope he thought he had lost. Neither man could have known that this moment would reveal connections that ran deeper than chance, or that love sometimes arrives wearing the face of redemption. The Scott family home in the Hawthorne district felt warmer with Adrian's quiet presence filling spaces that had been empty too long. Zephyr burst through the front door like a small hurricane, her curly brown hair wild from the museum's hands-on exhibits, chattering excitedly about dinosaur fossils and earthquake simulators. "Daddy, I learned that T-Rex arms weren't useless. They were actually super strong," she announced, dropping her backpack and immediately zeroing in on Adrian with the fearless curiosity only children possess. This was how Zephyr operated. Stephen knew. She collected people the way other children collected stickers, finding something fascinating in every new face. Within minutes, she had claimed the spot beside Adrian on the couch, peppering him with questions about his jacket, his watch, and whether he liked mac and cheese. Adrian's transformation was remarkable. The guarded tension in his shoulders melted away as he listened to Zephyr's endless stream of observations about everything from her loose tooth to her theory that squirrels were probably secret government agents. For the first time since Stephen had met him, Adrian genuinely smiled. As dinner progressed, Zephyr began sharing family stories with the unconscious ease of a child who had never learned to be guarded about love and loss. She told Adrian about her mommy who had gone to heaven, about Uncle Marcus who was a soldier hero, and about the pictures Daddy kept in the special box under his bed. Uncle Marcus was Daddy's big brother, and he was super brave, Zephyr explained, drawing invisible pictures in the air with her fork. He went to fight bad guys in a place called Afghanistan, she pronounced carefully. But he got hurt helping other soldiers and had to go live with Mommy in heaven instead of coming home to us. Adrian went very still, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Stephen watched color drain from Adrian's face as Zephyr continued her innocent narrative. Daddy has Uncle Marcus's Purple Heart medal in his army pictures, but he lost Uncle Marcus's favorite watch somewhere. And Daddy gets sad about that sometimes because it was Grandpa's watch first and Uncle Marcus promised to bring it home. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken recognition. Adrian set down his fork with trembling hands, staring at the military watch now sitting beside Stephen's plate. The same watch Marcus had promised to return. The same watch Adrian had carried for 2 years, unable to find its rightful home. Stephen felt the pieces clicking together with stunning clarity. The dates matched, the location matched, the unit designation Adrian had mentioned matched the reports Stephen had received about his brother's final mission. That night, after Zephyr had fallen asleep clutching a stuffed dinosaur, Stephen and Adrian sat in the kitchen surrounded by photo albums and military correspondence. Adrian's hands shook as he examined pictures of Marcus in uniform, his face growing pale with each confirmation that this was indeed the soldier whose life he had fought desperately to save. The full weight of their connection settled between them like a bridge spanning years of grief and guilt. Adrian had been the last person to see Marcus alive, the one who had held pressure on wounds and whispered encouragement during those crucial minutes before the helicopter arrived. He had done everything possible, but sometimes everything wasn't enough. Stephen found himself looking at Adrian with new eyes, seeing not just a broken stranger who needed help, but the man who had cradled his brother's head and fought against death itself in a dusty Afghan wasteland. This was the face Marcus had seen in his final moments, the voice that had promised he would make it home. Understanding bloomed between them, complex and painful and somehow beautiful. Grief had brought them together, but something stronger was keeping them in the same room, reluctant to let this impossible night end. 3 weeks had passed since that first evening, and Adrian Hayes had become woven into the fabric of Stephen and Zephyr's daily life with surprising naturalness. He helped with grocery shopping, his military precision making him efficient at navigating crowded stores. He could braid Zephyr's hair into intricate patterns that amazed her classmates. Most importantly, he filled the house with quiet presence that made both Stephen and his daughter remember what family could feel like. But the weight of unspoken truth pressed between Stephen and Adrian like a wound that wouldn't heal. Stephen found himself studying Adrian's face during unguarded moments, searching for traces of the story he desperately needed to hear, but was afraid to ask for. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening when Zephyr was at a sleepover. Stephen had been sorting through Marcus's belongings, a ritual he performed annually on the anniversary of his brother's death. He spread military documents across the dining room table, including the final letter Marcus had managed to dictate to a medic before losing consciousness. Adrian emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of coffee and froze when he saw the papers. His face went ashen as he recognized unit numbers, dates, and location coordinates that matched his own haunted memories. "You know, don't you?" Stephen said quietly, not looking up from the documents. "You were there when Marcus died." Adrian set the coffee cups down with careful precision, his hands visibly shaking. The silence stretched between them like a chasm neither was sure they could cross. "I tried everything," Adrian finally whispered, his voice breaking on each word. The shrapnel had torn through his chest cavity. "I kept pressure on the wounds, established an airway, pushed fluids, but there was too much internal bleeding." He was conscious for the first few minutes. He kept asking me to tell his little brother he was sorry he couldn't keep his promise. Stephen's vision blurred as tears he had held back for 2 years finally spilled over. He looked at Adrian through the haze of grief and gratitude, seeing the man who had been Marcus's final companion, who had held his brother's hand when Stephen couldn't. What was his promise? Stephen asked, though part of him already knew. To come home. Adrian said simply, to bring your father's watch back to you. He made me swear I would find you someday. But I never knew your last name, never knew where you lived. I only knew he had a little brother named Stephen who needed to know that Marcus wasn't afraid when he died. The dam broke completely then. Stephen crossed the room and pulled Adrian into an embrace that spoke of forgiveness, gratitude, and something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. Adrian collapsed against him, finally releasing the weight of survivor's guilt he had carried like armor for 2 years. They talked until dawn, filling in the spaces between official reports and personal memories. Adrian shared Marcus's final words, his jokes even while bleeding, his absolute determination that Adrian promised to take care of himself because someone still needed him in this world. As morning light filtered through the windows, Stephen realized that somewhere in the space between grief and healing, he had begun to fall in love with the man who had held his brother's heart beating for those crucial extra minutes. Love felt complicated and unexpected, but also inevitable, like finding something precious you didn't know you had lost. When Zephyr returned from her sleepover that afternoon, she found them sitting close together on the couch, sharing photo albums and stories. She didn't comment on her father's red-rimmed eyes or Adrian's obvious emotional exhaustion. She simply climbed between them and announced that she had decided Adrian belonged in their family permanently, regardless of what any grown-ups thought about it. Paul and Celestine Brennan arrived unannounced on a crisp November afternoon, their presence darkening Stephen's doorstep like storm clouds gathering before a hurricane. Michelle's parents had maintained careful distance since their daughter's death, their grief too overwhelming to allow regular contact with their granddaughter. Now they stood rigid and disapproving, their expressions sharp with suspicion and barely contained anger. "We need to discuss this Adrian Hayes situation," Celestine announced without preamble, brushing past Stephen into the living room where Zephyr was teaching Adrian a complicated clapping game. The little girl's laughter died instantly as she sensed the tension radiating from her grandparents. Stephen's protective instincts flared as he watched Paul's calculating gaze sweep over Adrian, cataloging everything from his worn clothing to the way he sat close enough to touch Zephyr's shoulder. These were people who had never learned to see past surfaces, who measured worth by bank accounts and social standing rather than character. The confrontation that followed revealed the depth of their investigation. They had hired a private detective to research Adrian's background, uncovering his military discharge, his PTSD diagnosis, his periods of homelessness, and most damning in their minds, his sexuality. They presented their findings like prosecutors building a case, each detail wielded as evidence of Adrian's unsuitability. "This man is clearly unstable," Paul declared, his voice cold with certainty. "He has no permanent address, no steady income, no family support system. He's targeting you because he sees opportunity in your grief and loneliness." Adrian sat frozen during their verbal assault, his military training warring with the civilians' learned helplessness that came from being society's perpetual outsider. Stephen watched Adrian's face close off, walls slamming down to protect whatever fragile healing had taken place over the past month. The threats came next, delivered with the casual cruelty that only family members can achieve. Paul and Celestine had consulted attorneys about grandparents' rights, about creating legal challenges that could drag Stephen through court battles lasting years. They painted pictures of custody evaluations, social workers, and newspaper headlines that would destroy Stephen's physical therapy practice. "We won't allow our granddaughter to be raised in an environment that promotes deviant lifestyle choices," Celestine stated with evangelical certainty. "This man represents everything that threatens traditional family values." Stephen felt rage building in his chest, but before he could respond, Adrian stood up with quiet dignity. His voice was steady despite the devastation in his eyes. "You're right about one thing," Adrian said, looking directly at Paul. "I don't have much to offer financially or socially, but I would never do anything to hurt this family. If my presence causes problems for Stephen and Zephyra, then I should leave." The words hit Stephen like physical blows. He watched Adrian gather his few belongings with military efficiency, saw him kneel down to whisper goodbye to Zephyra, observed him walk out the door without looking back. The house felt instantly hollow, as if something vital had been extracted from its very foundation. For 3 weeks, Stephen fought a battle on 2 fronts. He dealt with his in-laws' continued threats while simultaneously trying to convince Adrian to return. But Adrian had retreated into the protective isolation that had kept him alive on the streets, convinced that love meant sacrifice and that his sacrifice was staying away. Stephen found himself driving past Adrian's small apartment in southeast Portland, catching glimpses of him walking carefully through the neighborhood, always alone, always guarded. The man who had brought laughter back into their home had disappeared back into the shadows, leaving only the ghost of what they had almost built together. The lesson embedded itself slowly into Stephen's understanding. Sometimes love requires fighting not just for the person you care about, but against the systems and prejudices that try to tear apart anything that doesn't fit conventional expectations. Zephyra Scott had reached her limit with adult stupidity. For 3 weeks, she had watched her father move through their house like a ghost, heard him talking to Adrian's voicemail messages that were never returned, seen him staring at Marcus's watch with the kind of sadness that made her chest hurt. One Saturday morning, she marched into Stephen's home office carrying her art supplies and a determination that would have impressed battlefield commanders. She spread paper across his desk and began drawing with focused intensity, her small tongue poking out in concentration. The finished artwork showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. One had her distinctive curly hair, one wore a tie like Daddy, and one had sad eyes like Adrian. Above them, in her careful first-grade handwriting, she had written, "Family needs all parts." "We're going to get Adrian right now," she announced, rolling up the picture with ceremonial importance. "Uncle Marcus wouldn't want us to be shy when we could be together instead." Stephen felt the simple truth of his daughter's words pierce through to weeks of complicated adult fears. He had been so focused on protecting her from his in-laws' threats that he had forgotten to protect her from the greater threat of incompleteness. They drove through Portland's rain-slicked streets to Adrian's apartment building, a converted warehouse in an area where gentrification met stubborn resistance. Stephen climbed 3 flights of stairs carrying Zephyra, who clutched her drawing like a legal document that could resolve all adult confusion. Adrian answered their knock, looking gaunt and hollow-eyed, clearly surviving but not living. His face transformed when he saw them, hope and caution warring in his expression. "I brought proof," Zephyra announced solemnly, unrolling her picture. "This shows we're family, and families don't leave pieces missing just because some people are scared of happiness." Stephen stepped forward, carrying a manila folder that contained documents he had never shown Adrian. Military reports, witness statements, and most importantly, the letter Marcus had dictated during his final conscious moments. "I found the official records," Stephen said quietly, opening the folder with trembling hands. "Everything about that day, including the medic's report. Your report, Adrian." The documents told a story of extraordinary heroism under impossible circumstances. Adrian had crawled through enemy fire to reach Marcus and 2 other wounded soldiers. He had performed emergency surgery with minimal equipment while under active combat conditions. He had kept Marcus alive for 43 minutes beyond what any battlefield medic should have been able to achieve. But there was more. The letter Marcus had managed to dictate contained words Stephen had never fully understood until now. He spoke about an angel in combat fatigues who fought death itself and lost, but who deserved to know that his efforts meant everything to a dying soldier's final peace. "You didn't just try to save him," Stephen whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You gave him the chance to say goodbye. You gave him dignity in his final moments. You gave our family closure we never knew we needed." Adrian collapsed into Stephen's arms, finally releasing years of survivor's guilt and self-blame. They held each other while Zephyra climbed onto the couch beside them, patting Adrian's shoulder with the matter-of-fact kindness only children possess. The legal threats from Paul and Celestine evaporated when Stephen's attorney presented evidence of their harassment and discrimination. Their case crumbled further when character witnesses emerged from Adrian's military service, people who testified to his integrity and sacrifice. 6 months later, they stood together at Marcus's grave in Willamette National Cemetery. Placing fresh flowers beside the headstone, Zephyra had insisted on bringing her drawing, carefully laminated and weighted down with a painted stone that read "Brothers Forever." Adrian knelt beside the grave and spoke quietly to Marcus, thanking him for the gift of his brother's love and promising to honor the second chance at family that their connection had created. Love. Stephen realized, sometimes travels the longest distances to find us. It can arrive wearing the face of loss and transform into the foundation for everything we never knew we were brave enough to build. Sometimes the bridges we need most are constructed from the very experiences that once threatened to destroy us. The watch ticked steadily against Stephen's wrist, keeping time for all of them now, measuring moments that proved healing was possible when broken people chose to trust in the connection that makes strangers into family. Have you ever wondered how the people we lose continue to guide us toward the love we need most? Share your thoughts about the invisible connections that shape our lives, and subscribe to Heart Stories for more tales about the courage it takes to believe in second chances.